The night sky stretched endless and silent above the private jet, its engines humming with the steady rhythm of 1,000 journeys already completed. Yet tonight that rhythm faltered, as though fate had chosen this exact moment to weave together two lives that should never have crossed paths. Evelyn Harrington, a woman born of sharp angles and sharpened ambition, sat in her immaculate seat, a queen in scarlet, her laptop glowing with secrets of empires yet to be conquered. Every detail of her posture, every subtle curve of her body, framed by silk and precision, whispered of control, of elegance, of years spent teaching the world that she bowed to no one. But destiny is never impressed by power. Across the aisle, a man in a worn flannel shirt adjusted the tiny strap of his daughter's stuffed bear. His name was Nathan Carter, though at a glance he could have been mistaken for any quiet father returning from a school trip or a family visit. His hands were broad, with skin marked by years of real work, not the ink and contracts Evelyn handled. He leaned close to his daughter, whispering something that made her giggle, a sound so pure it felt like sunlight cutting through clouds. The warmth of that laughter drifted across the cabin and touched Evelyn before she even knew she was listening. It was healing in a way she could not name, unsettling in a way she could not resist. The first shiver of turbulence was nothing unusual. Passengers shifted, glasses rattled. But when the oxygen masks fell with a hollow thud, panic swept through the air like invisible fire. Evelyn's manicured fingers clutched her armrest, her heart pounding with a rare, unwanted sensation, helplessness. And then, as the cabin dissolved into cries and trembling, Nathan Carter rose. He did not shout. He did not flinch. His movements were calm, almost deliberate, like a man listening to an ancient song only he remembered. Evelyn's gaze locked on him. For reasons she could not explain, she could not look away. What unfolded in those breathless moments would alter more than the course of a failing jet. It would fracture the steel shell Evelyn had built around herself, a fortress of numbers and negotiations, and replace it with something she had long abandoned: trust. As alarms screamed and strangers prayed, Nathan's voice became the anchor that kept panic from consuming them all. The warmth in his tone, the quiet authority in his words, carried not only technical skill, but a strange, healing certainty that tomorrow might still exist. Evelyn had conquered boardrooms with a glance, but she felt herself conquered by that voice, by that steadiness, by the way he touched his daughter's hair, even as chaos swallowed the cabin. There was no romance in that moment, only survival. Yet sometimes survival itself plants the first seeds of something deeper. In Nathan's steady hands, Evelyn saw more than competence. She saw the rarest thing of all, a man who needed no audience, no applause, no wealth to define him. A man who carried his worth quietly, and in doing so lit the room brighter than her empire ever had. As the storm outside battered the jet, Evelyn's carefully ordered life cracked open. She realized that her wealth, her connections, her influence, all of it meant nothing if the engines failed and the earth rushed up to meet them. Yet one thing meant everything: the unshakable trust a little girl placed in her father. Watching Serena smile through the clear plastic of her oxygen mask, Evelyn felt something break inside her, a tenderness she had forgotten she was capable of. It was as though the child's innocence carried a healing power, reminding her that not all strength was carved in steel or stitched in scarlet dresses. Some strength was found in love so fierce it defied death itself. The landing that night would live in memory. a thunderous ballet of metal and faith, of engines screaming against the storm and human hearts beating louder still. And when the jet kissed the ground with violence yet mercy, when rain and fire trucks and tears blurred together into survival, Evelyn's world had already changed. She had seen him emerge, carrying his daughter against his chest, his shirt torn, his skin bruised, yet his eyes shining with unshakable fire. In that vision, Evelyn glimpsed a different kind of power, one that called to her soul in a way no deal ever had. Days turned into weeks, yet the memory lingered like a flame refusing to die. She would think of him in quiet moments, when her reflection in the glass of a skyscraper window seemed suddenly hollow. She would remember Serena's tiny voice singing through fear, and Nathan's steady presence, the way he had faced the abyss without arrogance or despair. Slowly, almost unwillingly, Evelyn felt herself drawn back, not by obligation, not by circumstance, but by the strange gravity of a man who lived not for empire, but for love. Their paths crossed again, not in boardrooms nor storm-lit skies, but in the small, ordinary corners of life Nathan chose to inhabit. A diner booth on a Saturday morning, his daughter's laughter spilling over plates of pancakes, a workshop filled with grease-stained tools and wide-eyed children eager to learn. And there, Evelyn discovered something more intoxicating than ambition. The warmth of a world where love was measured not in numbers, but in presence. Each smile from Serena, each quiet word from Nathan, was a gentle thread weaving her into their circle, pulling her closer to a family she never thought she needed. It was in those moments, those healing moments of simplicity, that Evelyn's heart softened. She began to see that romance was not in grand gestures or fiery declarations, but in the quiet way Nathan remembered his daughter's bedtime stories, or the way his calloused hands could be so tender when fixing a broken toy. Love revealed itself not with fanfare, but with the steady patience of sunrise, dawning on her soul until she could no longer deny it. And so, the story of a failing jet became the story of two hearts learning to fly. One had always ruled from the clouds, the other had always worked with the earth. Yet together they found a sky neither could have reached alone. Their love was not a collision, but a slow, healing transformation. A reminder that even in the most turbulent storms, sometimes what we are truly searching for is not survival, but someone worth surviving for. If this story brings you warmth, if it stirs something gentle in your heart, let it be more than words. Leave a trace of your presence, like, share, comment, or subscribe. In doing so, you keep this story alive, you help it travel further, healing and comforting others who may need a reminder that love, in all its quiet forms, still saves us. And as the next chapter unfolds, as Evelyn steps further into a world she once thought beneath her, and Nathan learns that love can bloom even after loss, the true romance begins, not in the skies, but here, on the ground, where hearts choose to stay. Evelyn Harrington had always defined herself by movement, by the rhythm of meetings stacked one after another, by the weight of signatures on contracts, by the glow of city skylines that reflected her empire back at her. Yet, in the weeks after the landing, the speed of her world felt strange, almost hollow, as though something essential had been stripped away mid-flight and had not yet returned. She carried the memory of that storm inside her, the sound of a child's lullaby against thunder, the image of a man with torn flannel and eyes sharp with resolve, the warmth of trust where she least expected it. It followed her through boardrooms and across continents, whispering at the edges of her thoughts until she could no longer ignore it. Her first step back into his world was unplanned. A quiet Saturday morning, when her chauffeur was given the day off, when her schedule was unusually light, when she found herself driving past a small-town diner that smelled of coffee and maple syrup before she realized why she had come. Through the window, she saw him, Nathan, his daughter, laughing with her nose scrunched, pancake syrup on her fingers, her bear seated proudly between them. It was such a simple picture, yet it struck Evelyn harder than any negotiation she had ever won. She stood outside for too long, watching through the glass, like an outsider gazing at a life she had forgotten to dream of. Then, gathering a breath she hadn't known she was holding, she entered. The bell above the door chimed, and Nathan's eyes lifted. There was a flicker of surprise, then recognition, then something warmer that made her chest ache. He did not rise with dramatic flourish, nor offer grand words. He simply smiled, the kind of smile that said she was welcome, not as a CEO, not as a woman in scarlet armor, but as someone who had once trusted him when trust was the only currency left. Serena's small hand waved eagerly, her joy unguarded, and Evelyn felt the healing presence of innocence wash over her like sunlight through stained glass. That morning stretched into an entire day. They wandered from the diner to the workshop. Nathan called his second home, where metal and grease and half-finished projects spoke of labor both humble and noble. Evelyn had never stood in such a place before. The air smelled of oil, of wood, of honest work, yet she found herself breathing deeper than she had in months. Nathan knelt beside a group of children, showing them how a gear fit into a larger mechanism, his voice patient, his hands steady. Serena clung to his arm, proud and glowing, and Evelyn realized that here was a kingdom greater than any she had built. In the quiet corners of the shop, she let herself listen to the laughter of children who had no fear of failing, to the cadence of Nathan's words, teaching not only mechanics but resilience, to the heartbeat of a life lived without endless flights and endless numbers. It was not the language she knew, yet it healed something in her she hadn't known was broken. She had always surrounded herself with glass towers and steel, but here she discovered the strength of gentleness, the beauty of presence, the poetry of a father who gave all his brilliance to ensure his daughter never doubted she was loved. As days turned into a rhythm of visits, sometimes brief, sometimes lingering, Evelyn felt herself pulled further into this world. Nathan did not try to impress her. He did not need to. His power lay in the ordinary, in showing up every morning, in the way his laughter softened even the hardest day, in the way he carried grief, yet still offered warmth. She began to notice the smallest details, the way he brushed sawdust from Serena's hair without breaking his sentence, the way his calloused hands could repair both machines and broken toys with equal tenderness, the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at his daughter. Each detail was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of love that was slow, steady, and profoundly healing. Evelyn was not a woman accustomed to yielding, yet she found herself yielding here, not with weakness, but with relief. She allowed herself to laugh without calculation, to sit on a wooden stool in jeans instead of silk, to hold Serena's hand as though it belonged in hers. The transformation was quiet but undeniable, like the shifting of seasons. She discovered that romance was not lightning or spectacle, but the steady warmth of being seen, of being chosen in the small hours of life. Nathan, too, felt the change. He had walled his heart after loss, living only for Serena, convinced that love belonged to a past that could not return. But Evelyn's presence slipped past his defenses, not because she tried, but because she simply was. Curious, willing, present. She carried power, yet laid it aside with them, learning how to listen to a child explain a drawing of hydraulic systems as though it were the most important contract in the world. And in those moments, Nathan saw not the CEO who commanded headlines, but the woman who leaned closer to understand, who laughed when grease stained her hands, who sat with them as though she had always belonged. The healing between them was unspoken, but real. Evelyn's loneliness softened. Nathan's grief began to lift. Serena thrived in the space between them, a small sun that drew them both into orbit. Their lives began to intertwine, not with fire, but with warmth, until Evelyn could not imagine the skyscraper without the small-town diner, and Nathan could not picture the workshop without the woman who now walked its aisles with quiet grace. And so the story moved forward, not with haste, but with patience, carrying them into a future they had never planned. Their hearts had survived storms and silence, but now they learned to flourish in peace. The romance that grew was not fragile but rooted, not fleeting but enduring. As Evelyn watched Nathan explain another lesson to a group of eager children, as Serena pressed closer to her side with the trust of one who already considered her family, Evelyn understood the truth she had once denied, that love, real love, arrives not with fanfare but with healing, and once it arrives, nothing can remain the same. The sun dipped lower, painting the workshop in shades of gold and fire. Nathan looked up, catching her eyes across the room, and in that gaze lay a promise unspoken, that this at last was a beginning worth holding on to. And as the light shifted into evening, their story, born from crisis, now unfolded into something deeper, a romance that would carry them into the days yet to come, where every moment was a chance to love, to heal, to build a life not measured in empires, but in hearts. The first year after the landing unfolded like a hidden garden slowly revealing itself, each season carrying new colors neither Nathan nor Evelyn expected. What had begun as rare visits grew into quiet rituals, as natural as breath. Saturday breakfasts at the diner became sacred, a space where the three of them sat not as survivor, CEO, and child, but as something far more intimate, something that hinted at family. Evelyn would arrive dressed not in silk or tailored lines, but in soft sweaters and jeans, her hair unstyled, her laughter unguarded. For Nathan, watching her lower the armor she had worn all her life felt like witnessing a sunrise after years of storms. Serena bloomed in the warmth of their togetherness. She tugged at Evelyn's hand as though it had always belonged to her, shared drawings of airplanes, and dreamt aloud of one day becoming an engineer who built machines her father would trust. In Evelyn she found not a replacement for the mother she had lost, but an ally, a listener, a presence who admired her questions instead of dismissing them. The child's affection wove Evelyn deeper into Nathan's life, each thread binding them with gentle strength. Evelyn, who once had measured her value by quarterly reports, now measured it in the light of Serena's smile, in the trust of a small hand reaching for hers. Yet for Nathan, love came with hesitation. His grief for his late wife had left a scar too deep to vanish easily. He carried memories like sacred stones, reminders of promises made in whispered voices, of a love that once had defined him. To open himself again felt like betrayal, as though moving forward meant leaving the past behind. But Evelyn never pushed, never demanded. She met his silence with patience, his distance with understanding, offering presence rather than pressure. It was in that patience, in that quiet healing, that Nathan began to realize love does not erase, it transforms. His heart could hold both memory and possibility, both grief and new tenderness, without betraying either. The moments of closeness came unexpectedly. A late evening in the workshop, when rain drummed against the roof, Evelyn stayed long after the children had left. Nathan showed her how to read the subtle lines of a hydraulic system, his hand brushing hers as he traced the diagram. The warmth of his touch lingered, not urgent, not demanding, simply present. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not only the man who had saved her life, but the man who carried pain and hope in equal measure. Their eyes held, the silence filled with more than words could hold, and though neither spoke it aloud, something shifted. A recognition of what had always been forming between them. Evelyn herself was changing in ways she had not anticipated. The boardroom no longer consumed her entirely. She still led with brilliance, still commanded respect, but she carried Nathan's lessons into her empire. She insisted her executives step into maintenance bays, demanded they learn not only numbers, but the mechanics that sustained their profits. It unsettled them, but she did not care. She had seen firsthand how trust and competence mattered more than any balance sheet. And every time she held her ground, she thought of Nathan's quiet authority, of the healing power he carried without ever realizing it. And she smiled. Their lives continued to weave together, sometimes in grand gestures, more often in the small, ordinary moments that revealed love's true shape. Evelyn reading Serena a bedtime story when Nathan was too tired to finish. Nathan showing Evelyn how to change a fuse in her car, his laughter spilling when she smudged her hands with grease and pretended outrage. Serena insisting they all sit together at the town fair Ferris wheel, her laughter filling the night air, while Evelyn clutched Nathan's hand, startled at her own joy. Each of these fragments built a mosaic of affection, a love rooted not in spectacle but in constancy. But love always asks for courage. For all the warmth that had grown, for all the healing they shared, Nathan still wrestled with the fear of loss. He feared opening himself fully only to lose again, feared giving Serena hope that might one day be shattered. Evelyn, too, carried fears of her own. The fear that she might never be enough, that Nathan's heart would forever belong to the ghost of the woman he had lost. These unspoken doubts lingered like shadows at the edges of their light. Yet love has a way of transforming shadows into depth. It was Serena who, without knowing, became their bridge once again. One evening, she presented Evelyn with a drawing, 3 figures holding hands beneath a wide sky, the words, "My family," scrawled in uneven letters at the top. Evelyn's breath caught as she looked at it, her chest aching with a tenderness she could not name. Nathan, too, stared at the paper, silence stretching long between them. But in his daughter's innocent certainty lay the truth neither had yet spoken aloud. They already were a family, woven together not by declaration, but by the steady accumulation of love. That night, as Serena slept, Nathan and Evelyn sat on the porch outside his home, the stars wide and unbroken above them. The quiet stretched, but it was no longer heavy. Nathan's voice finally came, rough but steady, confessing his fear, his grief, his guilt at loving again. Evelyn listened, her hand slipping into his, not with urgency, but with warmth, with healing. She told him she did not seek to replace what had been lost, only to walk beside him in what remained. And in that moment, Nathan understood that love was not betrayal. It was survival, renewal, the continuation of the heart's capacity to give. The kiss that followed was not the fiery rush of movies or fleeting passion. It was slow, steady, filled with the weight of everything they had endured and everything they hoped to build. It tasted of rain and starlight, of grief transformed and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, breathless but certain, Nathan rested his forehead against hers, whispering that maybe love could be both memory and future, both loss and healing. Evelyn's answer was only a smile, soft and luminous, carrying all the promise of dawn. From that night forward, their bond deepened with quiet assurance. They did not need grand proclamations. Their love revealed itself in the rhythm of life, morning coffees, shared responsibilities, gentle laughter. Serena grew taller, her dreams brighter, her family whole. And as Evelyn leaned more into this unexpected life, she realized that all her years of building empires had only been preparation for this. To love and be loved without armor, without pretense, with a heart that had finally found its home. The days carried them forward, each one an unfolding of something fragile yet strong. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, it was warm, it was healing, and it was enough to carry them into whatever storms or sunrises awaited together. Autumn settled gently over the town, painting the trees in amber and crimson, filling the air with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. For Evelyn, who had spent so many years in glass towers above city streets, the rhythm of the small town felt like stepping into another kind of life, slower, warmer, and unexpectedly healing. Days no longer blurred into meetings and deadlines. They unfolded like chapters, each one carrying moments worth remembering. She began to measure her life not by contracts signed, but by Serena's laughter echoing through the crisp evening air, by Nathan's steady presence at her side, by the quiet peace that came with belonging. Their love had taken root deeply by now, but it was not a love of spectacle. It was not rushed or showy. It thrived in the ordinary, in the way Nathan's hand found hers while walking down a street dusted with leaves, in the way Evelyn leaned into him when the night grew colder, trusting his warmth more than the finest coats she had ever worn. In these small moments she realized that the healing she had once sought in wealth and ambition was instead found in togetherness, in the patient presence of a man who valued people over power, who loved with the quiet certainty of the earth itself. Nathan, for his part, found himself changing in ways he never thought possible. For so long he had carried grief like an anchor, afraid that to love again would dishonor the memory of his late wife. But Evelyn's presence did not diminish what had been. It wove new colors into the fabric of his life, allowing him to hold memory and hope in the same breath. He noticed it most in Serena, who now carried an unshakable joy, no longer shadowed by loss. She had two hands holding hers, two hearts watching over her, and her world felt whole again. That completeness was Nathan's greatest gift, and though he had once feared it, he now embraced it fully. Their bond deepened through seasons of shared life. Evelyn, once defined by corporate battles, found herself kneeling in Nathan's workshop, her hands smudged with oil as she helped Serena build a toy airplane. She laughed when Nathan teased her about her clumsy grip on tools, and when he knelt behind her to guide her hands, his breath warm against her ear. The moment was both tender and electric, filled with the kind of intimacy that could only grow from trust. Later that night, as she washed the grease from her palms, she smiled at her reflection, not the CEO's reflection, not the mask of power, but the face of a woman learning to love freely, stripped of armor, touched by healing. There were challenges, as there always are. Evelyn's world of executives and investors sometimes clashed with Nathan's simple, grounded existence. There were nights when she returned late from flights, her heart heavy with the pull of two worlds. But Nathan never accused, never demanded. He welcomed her home with steady arms, listening to her stories with patience, reminding her that she was more than her work. And when doubt crept into her mind, whether she truly belonged in his life, whether her presence was enough, he quieted it not with promises but with actions, standing beside her in silence, bringing her coffee in the morning, holding her hand under the table while Serena chattered happily between them. It was this balance between challenge and comfort, ambition and simplicity, that made their love strong. They did not run from difficulties, they faced them together. Evelyn began to carry pieces of Nathan's wisdom into her corporate world, speaking of safety, trust, and humanity in places that once only knew profit. She watched hardened executives soften when she told the story of Flight 873, not as a tale of loss avoided, but as a lesson in the power of people, in the healing strength of trust. Each time she spoke, she carried Nathan's quiet courage with her, and each time she returned, Nathan listened as if hearing it for the first time, his pride unspoken but present in every glance. As winter approached, the three of them created new traditions. They decorated a Christmas tree in Nathan's modest living room, Serena's laughter bright as she directed where each ornament should go. Evelyn, standing on a chair to place the star, lost her balance and fell into Nathan's arms, and their shared laughter filled the space with a warmth no fireplace could match. Later, snow fell outside in silent beauty, while inside they sat together wrapped in blankets, Serena curled between them, Evelyn's head resting against Nathan's shoulder. In that stillness, surrounded by love, Evelyn realized that this was what she had always longed for, not the perfection of control, but the imperfection of family, alive and real. Spring came, and with it new beginnings. Evelyn spent more time at the workshop, not only learning, but teaching. Her sharp mind, once used to dominate negotiations, now explained concepts to curious children. Her language softened, her presence gentle. Nathan often watched her from a distance, marveling at the way she adapted, at how naturally she had woven herself into their world. She no longer stood apart. She belonged. And each day Nathan's heart opened wider, until he could no longer imagine life without her. Their romance grew deeper, yet it remained rooted in warmth, in healing, in presence. They did not need to chase passion. It came naturally in the way Evelyn brushed hair from Nathan's face after a long day, in the way Nathan kissed her forehead while Serena dozed on her lap, in the way they held each other, not out of desperation, but out of choice. Every glance, every touch, every shared silence carried the weight of love that had been tested by storms and proven by peace. As the second year of their life together unfolded, Nathan and Evelyn finally stood at a place they had both once thought unreachable. Their love had survived grief, ambition, and doubt. It had not only endured, but healed them both, binding their lives with threads of trust, patience, and quiet devotion. And though neither knew what the future held, what trials, what joys, they knew this. Whatever came, they would face it, not alone, but together. The days stretched forward like an open horizon, and for the first time, neither of them feared the flight. For they had already learned the truth. Love, once it takes root, is stronger than storms, deeper than fear, and as enduring as the sky itself. And with each step into tomorrow, their hearts carried not the weight of survival, but the gift of belonging, of healing, of love that would last. Summer arrived with its warmth, and with it came a new rhythm to their days, as if the world itself conspired to give them space to grow together. The air carried the fragrance of blooming fields and sunlit mornings, and for Nathan, Evelyn, and Serena, life unfolded with a sweetness that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary at once. Their love was no longer something unspoken. It was a presence woven into every glance, every laugh, every quiet evening they spent together. It had become as natural as breath, as steady as the beating of their hearts. Evelyn had never known what it meant to live without constant noise until she began spending her weekends at Nathan's home. The mornings were filled with the clinking of cups, Serena's bright chatter, and the sound of Nathan's voice humming low as he worked on small repairs. She learned the joy of stillness, the healing in silence shared with someone who understood without words. Sometimes she would simply sit at the porch with a book, watching Nathan fix something in the yard while Serena darted around like sunlight in motion. And it was in those quiet hours that she realized how deeply she had been starving for simplicity. It healed her in ways success never could. Nathan, in turn, discovered what it meant to be truly seen. Evelyn never dismissed his scars, never diminished his grief, never tried to reshape him into someone else. She loved him as he was, not as the world wanted him to be. He felt it in the way her eyes softened when he spoke of the past, in the way she listened when words caught in his throat, in the way she reached for his hand, not to guide him forward, but to walk beside him. For a man who had once thought love was a chapter forever closed, this gentle, unwavering acceptance was nothing short of redemption. Serena thrived under their love, her laughter filling every room, her energy bridging whatever gaps might have lingered between Nathan and Evelyn. She grew more confident, more secure, her drawings now featuring not only airplanes but families, always three figures, always hands joined. Each picture became a mirror of her heart, and each time she presented them, Nathan and Evelyn felt the undeniable truth that they were no longer separate lives but one. The child's healing innocence was the thread that had stitched them together, and in her trust they found the courage to keep choosing love. Their romance deepened through small rituals. Evening walks where the sunset painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. Evelyn leaning into Nathan's arm as Serena skipped ahead, her voice carrying songs she made up on the spot. Shared dinners where Evelyn tried her hand at cooking, laughing at her clumsy attempts until Nathan guided her hands with patient warmth, turning burned edges into tender memories. Nights by the fire when words faded into silence, and silence turned into kisses that lingered with unspoken promises. It was not passion that flared and vanished. It was love, steady enough to last. Love that healed because it was rooted in trust. But even in the midst of joy, shadows tried to return. There were times Evelyn's old life pulled at her, moments when she doubted if she could ever fully belong in Nathan's world. There were times Nathan wondered if he deserved this second chance, if loving Evelyn meant betraying the memory of the woman he had once vowed to love forever. Yet each fear was met not with distance, but with closeness. Evelyn would take his hand, whispering that the past did not vanish, that his love for his late wife would always matter, but that his heart was vast enough to hold both memory and new beginnings. Nathan, in return, reminded her that she did not have to become anyone else to belong. She was enough as she was in her power and her tenderness. These moments of vulnerability did not weaken them. They healed them, binding them more tightly with threads of truth. Seasons of work and rest intertwined. Evelyn began shaping her company differently, guided not by profit alone, but by the lessons she had learned from Nathan. Lessons about safety, trust, and valuing the hands that held lives together. Her voice in boardrooms carried warmth it had never known before, and her executives listened differently now, hearing not just strategy, but conviction born of lived truth. Each time she returned to Nathan's workshop, she carried that part of him with her, a reminder that her power was strongest when rooted in compassion. And Nathan, seeing her step into both worlds with grace, loved her all the more for it. One evening, as the three of them sat beneath a sky thick with stars, Serena asleep on Evelyn's lap, Nathan finally allowed the words that had been building for months to escape him. His voice was quiet but steady. He told Evelyn he loved her. Not in a rush, not in desperation, but with the calm certainty of a man who had thought love gone forever and found it returned, softer and stronger than before. Evelyn's answer came in the form of tears, not of sadness but of release, followed by words that trembled with truth. She loved him too. The kiss they shared beneath the night sky sealed not just a confession, but a promise, a vow born not of ceremony, but of lived life, of storms weathered and hearts healed. From that night onward, their love carried a new depth. It was no longer tentative, no longer held back by fear. It became a foundation, one that promised not perfection, but presence, not endless sunshine, but the courage to face storms together. And as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Evelyn, Nathan, and Serena built a life that was at once fragile and unbreakable, tender and enduring. They were no longer fragments of separate worlds. They were a family, bound not by titles or blood, but by love that chose itself daily. Their story was no longer just survival. It was rebirth. And as summer deepened, their hearts opened further, ready for the next chapter of a journey that had only just begun. The following autumn carried with it a quiet maturity in their love, as though the turning leaves mirrored the transformations within their hearts. Evelyn, once a woman who had built her world on relentless ambition, began to embrace the rhythm of Nathan's life with a tenderness that surprised even herself. She found joy in the ordinary, the clatter of tools in his workshop, the way Serena's laughter echoed through the yard, the peace of evenings spent on the porch watching the horizon burn with sunset. It was not the life she had envisioned in her youth, but it was the life she had secretly longed for, one where love was steady, healing, and real. Nathan felt it too, the grounding weight of this new season, the sense that his home had expanded beyond its walls. Evelyn's presence was no longer occasional. It was part of the very air he breathed. He grew used to the sound of her footsteps in the morning, the way she filled his kitchen with the aroma of coffee, the way her laughter softened the edges of every hard day. Sometimes he would simply pause, watching her lean over Serena's shoulder to admire a drawing or help with homework, and in those quiet glances he knew he had been given a second chance at life, a chance he never thought possible. His grief had not vanished, but it had been transformed, healed into something gentler by the love that now surrounded him. Serena thrived in this new wholeness. She carried herself with a joy that came from knowing she was safe, cherished, and seen. She began to dream aloud not only of airplanes and skies, but of family adventures, of birthdays celebrated together, of a future that always included both her father and Evelyn. Her innocence carried a wisdom that neither Nathan nor Evelyn could ignore. She already considered them a family, already believed their love was something permanent. Her trust gave them courage, reminding them that sometimes children see the truth before adults are ready to admit it. Their love deepened in the rituals of daily life. Nathan taught Evelyn the subtle art of repairing engines, his hands guiding hers as she leaned into his warmth, her laughter spilling when she fumbled, but her determination fierce. Evelyn, in turn, introduced Nathan to the elegance of her world, though now softened by her new perspective. She invited him to conferences not as a token guest, but as an equal voice, presenting his insights to executives who had never seen grease-stained hands command such respect. The balance between their worlds was delicate, but it grew steadier with every step, each of them learning to carry pieces of the other's life as their own. There were challenges too. Old fears lingered. Nathan still questioned if he deserved happiness after loss, and Evelyn still battled the whisper that she was too different, too far removed from his simple life to belong. But each doubt was met with love, not avoidance. Evelyn held Nathan when his memories returned in quiet storms. Nathan reminded her through his touch and presence that she was more than enough. Their honesty became a balm, their trust a shelter where healing was constant and love could grow without fear. One evening in late October, they found themselves at a town festival, lanterns glowing against the cool night, music weaving through the air. Nathan held Serena's hand while Evelyn walked beside them, the three of them moving through laughter and light, as though they had always been together. At the Ferris wheel, Serena insisted they all ride together, squeezing between them as the carriage rose into the starlit sky. Nathan's arm brushed against Evelyn's, and when their eyes met, the world below seemed to fade away. In that suspended moment, high above the ground, Evelyn realized she no longer stood between two worlds. She belonged here, with him, with Serena, with this life built not from ambition, but from love. The ride ended, but the certainty did not. That night, back at Nathan's home, as Serena slept peacefully with Astrid the bear tucked against her cheek, Nathan and Evelyn sat before the fireplace. The flames painted their faces in gold and shadow, and in the stillness Nathan finally spoke of the depth of his love, of how she had healed places he thought would remain broken forever. His words were quiet, but they carried the weight of truth. Evelyn's response came not in speeches but in touch, her hand against his cheek, her kiss soft and lingering, her heart wide open. From that moment their love was no longer cautious. It was certain, rooted in trust, nourished by healing, and alive in every shared glance and every gentle embrace. They were no longer two people from different worlds. They were one family, whole and unbreakable. And as winter approached once more, bringing with it long nights and soft snow, their hearts carried the warmth of a fire that no storm could extinguish. Next, the story of their love, born from crisis and shaped by healing, now moved toward a new horizon. What had begun in fear and survival had become a testament to trust, to presence, to the quiet miracle of love chosen daily. And as the days turned toward the next season, their hearts prepared for the future, together, always together. Winter arrived like a soft hymn, snow blanketing the town in silence, muffling every sound except the laughter that seemed to bloom within Nathan's home. For Evelyn, who once spent winters in penthouse suites and conference halls, this season felt like a rebirth. She found beauty in mornings by the fire, in the quiet ritual of Nathan making cocoa for Serena, in the way the girl's cheeks glowed pink as she pressed her face against frosted windows. The rhythm of their days grew slower, gentler, but in that slowing, Evelyn discovered a healing warmth that reached deeper than any success she had ever claimed. Nathan, watching her move through his home with ease, felt a quiet wonder that never left him. He noticed the way she had adapted. Once a woman of sharp lines and guarded power, she now laughed easily, moved with grace in simple sweaters, and carried herself not with the armor of command, but with the ease of belonging. When she bent to tuck Serena into bed, brushing stray hair from the child's forehead with tenderness, Nathan's chest tightened with gratitude. He had thought love was a chapter closed, yet here it was, alive again, written in the language of patience and second chances. Serena embraced the season with her unshakable innocence, becoming the light around which their days orbited. She drew pictures of their family in the snow, her boots stamping patterns into white fields. She sang softly to her bear while Evelyn and Nathan watched from the porch, their hands brushing together, their hearts united in the quiet miracle of seeing love through a child's eyes. Her presence was more than joy, it was healing, a daily reminder that brokenness could be mended, that grief could give way to laughter, that love could make a home whole again. Their love deepened in the rituals of winter. They baked together, flour dusting Evelyn's hands as she laughed at her lack of skill, Nathan guiding her gently, Serena clapping at every small success. They decorated the tree, strings of light illuminating the room, while soft music played in the background. One evening, when the snow outside fell in endless silence, they sat together by the fire, Serena asleep on the rug with her bear, and Evelyn leaned into Nathan's arms. The glow of flames reflected in their eyes, and without needing words, both knew that what they had built was no longer fragile, it was unshakable. Yet winter also brought reflection. Nathan still carried memories of his late wife, and there were nights when grief slipped back into his heart uninvited. He would sit in silence, his eyes distant, and Evelyn never tried to chase the pain away. Instead, she sat with him, her hand resting over his, her presence a balm. She reminded him through quiet constancy that love did not erase what had been. It added to it, layered hope upon memory, healing upon loss. And with her there, Nathan learned to let his grief breathe without letting it define him. Evelyn, too, faced her own fears. There were moments when she doubted if she could truly sustain this life. If a woman shaped by power could really belong in this quiet world of tools, laughter, and warmth. But Nathan's eyes always met hers with steady certainty, as though he saw past every fear straight into the heart she tried to hide. His love reminded her that she did not need to prove herself here. She was already enough. She was already loved. One evening, during a storm that painted the world outside in shades of white, Nathan built a fire while Evelyn prepared dinner. The three of them sat at the table, the storm raging beyond their walls, and yet inside all was warmth and safety. Serena, with the blunt wisdom of children, looked up and announced, "We're a family now." The words fell like a blessing, soft but undeniable. Nathan's throat tightened, Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, and in that moment both knew Serena had spoken the truth their hearts already carried. That night, after Serena was asleep, Nathan and Evelyn stood at the window, watching snow fall under the soft glow of street lamps. Nathan turned to her, his voice low, and told her she had healed a part of him he thought would never mend. Evelyn answered not with words, but with a kiss, long and tender, a promise written in touch. Their love, born of crisis, had become a sanctuary, a place where brokenness turned to strength, where loneliness was replaced by belonging. As winter slowly yielded to spring, their bond was no longer something tentative. It had become the foundation of their lives, strong and steady, healing and whole. Their days ahead promised change, promised challenges, but they no longer feared the unknown. Together, with Serena's laughter guiding them, they stepped forward with hearts open, ready for the next chapter of their journey, where love, trust and presence would continue to write the story of their lives. Spring awakened with soft rains and blossoms unfurling like secrets long kept, and in that unfolding season, the love between Nathan and Evelyn ripened into something both tender and unshakable. The air carried a sweetness that clung to every morning, every glance, every shared silence. For Evelyn, the woman who had once lived in glass towers and steel corridors, the gentle rhythm of Nathan's life had become not an escape but a homecoming. She no longer measured her worth by headlines or contracts, but by the laughter of Serena in the garden, by the warmth of Nathan's hand steady in hers, by the quiet miracle of finding peace where once she had only known pursuit. Their days were stitched together in the beauty of ordinary rituals that now held the weight of eternity. Breakfast at the diner, where the waitress greeted them with knowing smiles. Long afternoons in the workshop, where Evelyn learned the patience of gears and oil, her laughter mingling with Serena's chatter as Nathan guided them both. Evenings on the porch, when the sky burned orange and violet, and the world seemed to whisper its blessing. These moments healed Evelyn in ways she hadn't thought possible, dissolving the fractures of loneliness she had carried for years. She realized that success without love was empty, but love, even quiet, simple love, was a wealth greater than any empire. Nathan, too, found his soul renewed. He had feared for so long that his heart was buried beneath grief, that no new beginning could ever bloom in its shadow. Yet Evelyn's presence had proven otherwise. She did not erase the past. She honored it, held it with him, wove healing into the ache until it became part of their strength instead of their wound. He discovered that love could return not as fire consuming all in its path, but as steady flame warming everything around it. Watching Evelyn bend to help Serena with a project, watching her smile at successes small and great, Nathan felt gratitude rise within him daily like breath, a reminder that love had found him again, not because he sought it, but because he had chosen to remain open to life. Serena carried their love as naturally as she carried her bear, Astrid. She danced through the days with unshaken certainty that her family was whole, and in her innocence she mirrored the truth they sometimes hesitated to voice. She did not question whether Evelyn belonged. She simply accepted it, embodying the healing that only children can offer. Her joy tied them together, her laughter echoing like a promise that love was meant to endure. Yet even in the sweetness, there were challenges. Evelyn's world still demanded her time, still tested her with responsibilities that tugged at the edges of the life she was building. Nathan still wrestled with doubts in the quiet of night, fears that happiness was too fragile to last. But each challenge became another chance to choose each other, another opportunity to prove that their love was not delicate glass, but tempered steel, forged in trials, softened by healing. And with every choice they grew stronger, their roots sinking deeper into the soil of trust. There were grander moments, too, moments when their love spilled beyond the ordinary into something almost holy. A spring evening when rain fell like silver threads, and Nathan pulled Evelyn into a dance beneath the storm, their laughter mixing with thunder, their hearts beating as one. A morning when Evelyn awoke to find Serena curled against her, whispering in her sleep, "Mommy, Evelyn." Words that made tears rise to her eyes and sealed forever the truth that love had bound them as family. And one quiet night, when Nathan finally looked into Evelyn's eyes and said not only, "I love you," but "I want forever," his voice steady, his hands trembling, his heart unguarded, she answered not with hesitation, but with joy. For Evelyn had found in Nathan not just a partner, but a sanctuary, a place where ambition no longer felt like a burden, where she could breathe, laugh, and belong. And Nathan had found in Evelyn not just companionship, but healing, proof that love could return after loss, stronger and truer than before. Their souls, once marked by loneliness, now thrived in the abundance of each other. As spring unfolded into summer, they stood on the edge of a new chapter. The garden bloomed around them. Serena's laughter rang through open windows, and their home was filled not with wealth or grandeur, but with the presence of love. It was simple. It was profound. It was everything. And in that simplicity lay their greatest truth, that the storms they had survived had only prepared them for this peace, that the love they now shared was not fragile but eternal, healing them daily with its warmth. And as this story of love continues, I want to invite you into it. If these words touched your heart, if they gave you even a moment of peace, of light, of healing, let me know. Comment your thoughts, share your feelings. Do you believe love can truly heal even the deepest wounds? I would love to hear your voice. And don't forget to like and subscribe, not as a formality, but as a way of keeping this journey alive, of walking together through stories that remind us of what matters most. Because in the end, love is the story we are all searching for, and together we can keep that flame burning bright.